Hello, it's Paulus here, the Cabaret Geek. I am often asked, why are you called Paulus? And here is the answer. I've got 4 big shout outs, and the first one is to the Bachelor family from my childhood, Michael and his parents. Now, when I went round to Michael's house as a kid, his dad would answer the door and say, "Ah, it's Paulus, the wood gnome," and usher me in through the hallway. And I'm like, who? What is that? I don't know what that is. And he would never explain to me, as, quirky dads that one knew as a child wouldn't. And then I go and play with Michael and do whatever we were doing. And it was years and years and years before I found out that Paulus the wood gnome is a cartoon character, a sort of Nordic cartoon character with a bald head and a white beard, which worryingly is increasingly what I'm becoming. So love and thanks for that little name check, Bachelor family, especially Daddy Bachelor. My second shout out is to my dear friend, cabaret practitioner and director of my Victoria Wood show, looking for my friend Sarah Louise Young. When we met as teenagers in Canterbury, we went to different schools, and hers was much posher than mine, as though she did Latin, and she nicknamed me, presumably because of the Latin she was learning, Paulus Vandrolus, as soon as she met me. I don't know what Vandrol means, but if you put an us on the end of anything, it's sort of Latin, isn't it? So that was the second point where I was like, oh right, is that my name these days? As though she's been calling me that in some way or other since I was 13. And then when I went to drama school, my next shout out is to Becky Hall. Hello, my darling. Becky just used to start calling me Paulus Martinez, and I don't know why. I don't think she ever heard Sarah or Michael's dad before her, because I don't think they knew each other. It was another world entirely to me, another group of people, but it kept coming back. And then 5 years ago, I sat down and I read for the first time this lovely book by John Major, who is my last shout out. And thank you to John Major for telling me all about the history of music hall, including a performer called Paulus, who performed in the late 1800s in France, but also sometimes came over to England to perform in music hall. And what I've extrapolated from Major's very, very interesting book, and I recommend it to anybody in the arts, it's fascinating, not least of all because his dad was a music hall performer, and that's why it's called My Old Man, was that Paulus, the French original Paulus, the performer, who was a singer like me, who was described as a deftly professional, which I'm enjoying very much, but also full of self-delusion, which, tick. They lived and performed at this very, very crucial time for the history of what we do, because in France, cafe culture was becoming cabaret for the first time. So cafe culture being sort of the French sister of music hall in England, it was for the very first time sort of morphing with Le Chat Noir and the Moulin Rouge into what became cabaret. And I think if there's one way to describe me, it's this sort of straddling of those two things, I think, is a very good place to put me and what I do, and always has been. So when I read that 5 years ago, I just thought, well, that's a no-brainer. I'm definitely nicking that. So it's nicked. That's the story. I've nicked it off a French bloke who's dead. But I think there's a blooming good reason behind it, which hopefully I've explained a little of today. Thanks for watching. See you next time, if we're saved.